Good evening, and welcome to the 15th installment of my reading of S. Morgenstern's classic, The Princess Bride. Inigo awoke to Yesti's face. "I was beaten," Inigo whispered. "I failed him." Yesti could only say, "Sleep." Inigo slept. The bleeding stopped after a day, and the pain stopped after a week. They buried Domingo, and for the first and last time, Inigo left Arabella. His face bandaged, he rode in Yesti's carriage to Madrid, where he lived in Yesti's house, obeyed Yesti's commands. After a month, the bandages were removed, but the scars were still deep red. Eventually they softened some, but they always remained the chief features of Inigo's face. The giant parallel scars, running one on each side from temple to chin. For 2 years, Yesti cared for him. Then one morning, Inigo was gone. In his place were 3 words: "I must learn," on a note pinned to Yesti's pillow. Learn? Learn what? What existed beyond Madrid that the child had to commit to memory? Yesti shrugged and sighed. It was beyond him. There was no understanding children anymore. Everything was changing too fast, and the young were different. Beyond him, life was beyond him. The world was beyond him. You name it, it was beyond him. He was a fat man who made swords. That much he knew. So he made more swords, and he grew fatter, and the years went by. As his figure spread, so did his fame. From all across the world they came, begging him for weapons. So he doubled his prices, because he didn't want to work too hard anymore. He was getting old, but when he doubled his prices, when the news spread from duke to prince to king, they only wanted him more desperately. Now the wait was 2 years for a sword, and the lineup of royalty was unending, and Yesti was growing tired. So he doubled his prices again. And when that didn't stop them, he decided to triple his already doubled and redoubled, and besides that, all work had to be paid for in jewels in advance, and the wait was up to 3 years, but nothing would stop them. They had to have swords by Yesti or nothing, and even though the work on the finest was nowhere what it once was, Domingo, after all, no longer could save him, the silly rich men didn't even notice. All they wanted was his weapons, and they fell over each other with jewels for him. Yesti grew very rich, and very heavy. Every part of his body sagged. He had only fat thumbs in Madrid. Dressing took an hour, breakfast the same. Everything went slowly. But he could still make swords, and people still craved them. "I'm sorry," he said to the young Spaniard who entered his shop one particular morning. "The wait is up to 4 years, and even I am embarrassed to mention the price. Have your weapon made by another." "I have my weapon," the Spaniard said, and he threw the 6-fingered sword across Yesti's workbench. Such embraces. "Never leave again," Yesti said. "I eat too much when I'm lonely." "I cannot stay," Inigo told him. "I'm only here to ask you one more question. As you know, I have spent the last 10 years learning. Now I have come for you to tell me if I'm ready." "Ready? For what? What in the world have you been learning?" "The sword." "Madness," said Yesti. "You spent 10 entire years just learning to fence?" "No, not just learning to fence," Inigo answered. "I did many other things as well." "Tell me." "Well," Inigo began, 10 years is what? About 3,600 days? And that's about, I figured this out once, so I remember pretty well, about 86,000 hours. Well, I always made it a point to get 4 hours sleep per night. That's 14,000 hours right there, leaving me perhaps 72,000 hours to account for." "You slept. I'm with you. What else?" "Well, I squeezed rocks." "I'm sorry. My hearing sometimes fails me. It sounded like you said you squeezed rocks." "To make my wrists strong, so I could control the sword. rocks like apples. That size. I would squeeze them in each hand for perhaps 2 hours a day, and I would spend another 2 hours a day in skipping and dodging and moving quickly so that my feet would be able to get me into position to deliver properly the thrust of a sword. That's another 14,000 hours. I'm down to 58,000 now. Well, I always sprinted 2 hours each day as fast as I could, so my legs, as well as being quick, would also be strong. That gets me down to about 50,000 hours. Yesti examined the man before him. Blade thin, 6 feet in height, straight as a sapling, bright-eyed, taut. Even motionless, he seemed whippet quick. And these last 50,000 hours, these have been spent studying the sword? Inigo nodded. Where? Wherever I could find a master. Venice, Bruges, Budapest. I could have taught you here? True, but you care for me. You would not have been as ruthless. You would have said, Excellent, Perry Inigo. Now that's enough for one day. Let's have supper. That does sound like me, Yesti admitted. But why was it so important? Why was it worth so much of your life? Because I could not fail him again. Fail who? My father. I have spent all these years preparing to find the 6-fingered man and kill him in a duel. But he is a master, Yesti. He said as much, and I saw the way his sword flew at Domingo. I must not lose that duel when I find him. So now I have come to you. You know swords and swordsmen. You must not lie. Am I ready? If you say I am, I will seek him through the world. If you say no, I will spend another 10 years and another 10 after that, if that is what is needed. So they went to Yesti's courtyard. It was late morning, hot. Yesti put his body in the chair, and the chair in the shade. Inigo stood waiting in the sunshine. We need not test desire, and we know you have sufficient motive to deliver the death blow, Yesti said. Therefore, we need only probe your knowledge and speed and stamina. We need no enemy for this. The enemy is always in the mind. Visualize him. Inigo drew his sword. The 6-fingered man taunts you, Yesti called. Do what you can. Inigo began to leap around the courtyard, the great blade flashing. He uses the Agrippa defense, Yesti shouted. Immediately, Inigo shifted position, increased the speed of his sword. Now he surprises you with Bonetti's attack. But Inigo was not surprised for long. Again his feet shifted. He moved his body in a different way. Perspiration was pouring down his thin frame now, and the great blade was blinding. Yesti continued to shout. Inigo continued to shift. The blade never stopped. At 3 in the afternoon, Yesti said, Enough! I am exhausted from the watching. Inigo sheathed his 6-fingered sword and waited. You wish to know if I feel you are ready to duel to the death a man ruthless enough to kill your father, rich enough to buy protection, older, more experienced, an acknowledged master. Inigo nodded. I tell you the truth. It's up to you to live with it. First, there has never been a master as young as you. 30 years at least before that rank has been reached, and you are barely 22. Well, the truth is, you are an impetuous boy, driven by madness, and you are not now, and you will never be a master. Thank you for your honesty, Inigo said. I must tell you, I had hoped for better news. I find it very hard to speak just now, so if you please excuse me, I'll be on my... I had not finished, Yesti said. What else is there to say? I loved your father very dearly. That you know. But this you did not know. When we were very young, not yet 20, we saw with our own eyes an exhibition by the Corsican wizard, Bastia. I know of no wizards. It is the rank beyond master in swordsmanship, Yesti said. Bastia was the last man so designated. Long before your birth, he died at sea. There have been no wizards since, and you would never in this world have beaten him. But I tell you this, he would never in this world have beaten you. Inigo stood silent for a long time. I am ready then. I would not enjoy being the six-fingered man, was all Yesti replied. The next morning, Inigo began the track down. He had it all carefully prepared in his mind. He would find the six-fingered man. He would go up to him. He would say simply, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And then, oh then, the duel. It was a lovely plan, really. Simple, direct, no frills. In the beginning, Inigo had all kinds of wild vengeance notions, but gradually, simplicity had seemed the better way. Originally, he had all kinds of little plays worked out in his mind. The enemy would weep and beg. The enemy would cry and cringe. The enemy would bribe and slobber and act in every way unmanly. But eventually, these too gave way in his mind to simplicity. The enemy would simply say, "Oh yes, I remember killing him. I'll be only too delighted to kill you too." Inigo had only one problem. He could not find the enemy. It never occurred to him that there would be the least difficulty. After all, how many noblemen were there with 6 fingers on their right hands? Surely it would be the talk of whatever his vicinity happened to be. A few questions. "Pardon, I'm not crazy, but have you seen any 6-fingered noblemen lately?" And surely sooner or later there would be an answering yes. But it didn't come sooner. And later wasn't the kind of thing you wanted to hold your breath for either. The first month wasn't all that discouraging. Inigo crisscrossed Spain and Portugal. The second month he moved to France and spent the rest of the year there. The year following that was his Italian year, and then he went to Germany and the whole of Switzerland. It was only after 5 solid years of failure that he began to worry. By then he had seen all of the Balkans and most of Scandinavia, and he had visited the Florinese and the natives of Gilder, and into Mother Russia, and down, step by step, around the entire Mediterranean. By then he knew what had happened. 10 years learning was 10 years too long. Too much had been allowed to happen. The 6-fingered man was probably crusading in Asia, or getting rich in America, or a hermit in the East Indies, or dead. Inigo, at the age of 27, began having a few extra glasses of wine at night to help him get to sleep. At 28, he was having a few extra glasses to help him digest his lunch. At 29, the wine was essential to wake him in the morning. His world was collapsing around him. Not only was he living in daily failure, something almost as dreadful was beginning to happen. Fencing was beginning to bore him. He was simply too good. He would make his living during his travels by finding the local champion wherever he happened to be, and they would duel, and Inigo would disarm him and accept whatever they happened to bet. And with his winnings, he would pay for his food, and his lodging, and his wine. But the local champions were nothing. Even in the big cities, the local experts were nothing. Even in the capital cities, the local masters were nothing. There was no competition, nothing to keep him on edge. His life began to seem pointless, his quest pointless, everything without reason. At 30, he gave up the ghost. He stopped his search, forgot to eat, slept only on occasion. He had his wine for company, and that was enough. He was a shell. The greatest fencing machine since the Corsican wizard was barely even practicing with the sword. He was in that condition when the Sicilian found him. At first, the little hunchback only supplied him with stronger wine, but then, through a combination of praise and nudging, the Sicilian began to get him off the bottle. Because the Sicilian had a dream. With his guile, plus the Turk's strength, plus the Spaniard's sword, they might become the most effective criminal organization in the civilized world. Which was precisely what they became. In dark places, their names whipped sharper than fear. Everyone had needs that were hard to fulfill. The Sicilian crowd, 2 was company, 3 a crowd, even then, became more and more famous and more rich. Nothing was beyond or beneath them. Inigo's blade was flashing again, more than ever like lightning. The Turk's strength grew more prodigious with the months. But the hunchback was the leader. There was never doubt. Without him, Inigo knew where he would be. On his back, begging wine in some alley entrance. The Sicilian's sword was not just law, it was gospel. So when he said, "Kill the man in black!" all other possibilities ceased to exist. The man in black had to die. Thanks for reading with me tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.